Hi everyone, thank you for checking out this video. On Saturday, February 13th at 2 p.m., Nutley Museum Director John Simko presented via Zoom about Nutley Murals and Nutley Muralists, from the Grace Church to the Waldorf-Astoria. If you get a chance, check out our YouTube page for other recorded videos, such as John's tour of the Nutley Museum, where you can learn more about its collection as well as neat projects the Nutley Historical Society is working on. Thank you to John for presenting for us.
The next slide, we're not going to go year by year, but murals are very early art forms. Here we're going to go back 30,000 years ago to the Lascaux Caves and just see the mural art that these Neanderthals had made. One of the things that I want to point out here is not only is our murals adhere to the architecture, but the architecture determines the shape of a lot of what happens. You're going to see some architectural lunettes, curved shapes that you've got to fit a mural in. This one's very obvious. The rough shape of the wall had to be designed around. So keep that in mind even when we look at some more modern murals. I could have picked an ancient Egyptian one. I happen to go with a Roman one here, I think from Herculaneum. So murals are ancient Roman paintings. The next one is, could easily be Michelangelo, same era, but this is Raphael's. These are some of the rooms that the Pope lives in. So these big, magnificent murals, these are true mural works. Here is the most famous one, I think, the Leonardo da Vinci, The Last Supper, which, by the way, is the Last Supper because it's on the back wall of a dining hall that the monks would live in. And you can even see that even the sacred Leonardo has to make way for that doorway that's cut in right to the bottom of that. So the architecture dictates a lot of what murals can be like. The next picture here is a Diego Rivera. Painting on a wall inside of a lunette. You see the lunette, but you also see how it's got to bow to the dictates of the stairway there. So public art in general, but art that needs to conform to its architecture. Here you see the scaffolding that is painted on, but is put on and shown in a way that people need to paint these massive works of art. Murals, almost by definition, are larger than portraiture or than canvas painting, and this is a good sample of that. If we get real modern, this is up on 100, I think it might be 120th Street or so, up on the west side of Manhattan, The Crack is Whack by Keith Haring mural. Here's one that a lot of us might recognize from down the shore. This is being prepared. This is in Chinatown about 2 years ago. This is actually, you could think of this street as a canvas that is being prepared for a mural to be painted on it. So again, murals could be on walls, on ceilings, indoors, outdoors. This is one I used to pass by every day on my way into the office. Downtown Manhattan, of course, murals can move if they're painted onto the side of a subway. And just two more from Lower Manhattan that I'll share with you. Those two here. You could see integrated into the wall, even with the signs and the sprinkler systems that are still left there. So a wide range of art can be murals, and a wide range of mediums as well. So to focus now in on Nutley, what I want to do is to focus on those professionals who lived in Nutley but wound up painting elsewhere. First one is a woman whose name is Mary Florence Sargant, S-A-R-G-A-N-T, and she actually lived in a house. She's shown in England in this photograph, but she lived in a house on 111 Vreeland. It is, if I show you the next picture here, this is a house that's on, it's 111 Vreeland, but it's technically, it is on Warren Street, the little side street that goes off of there. Long story as to why it's got the other address, but this was a barn that Mary had converted. This is her son Noel, by the way, that Mary had converted into an art studio. This is 1890. 1892, her husband passes. She returns to England and she keeps up painting. And in fact, there are a number of frescoes, true frescoes, not oil on canvas, that she painted in a number of buildings in England. Unfortunately, none of them exist, and we're going to see this a lot with murals. Murals are as permanent as they seem. They are as permanent as the building that they are in. And so often buildings come down, they cannot, or people don't even think to save the artwork inside, and that's what happened to Mary's work. So our earliest one is a woman artist who had converted, again, a barn on her property right here in Nutley into an art studio, returns to England, and continues true fresco painting. The next story of professionals in Nutley, professional muralists, is almost all out of this one particular house. This is 16 Enclosure. This is a house that was built by Frank Fowler. This is a painting of Frank Fowler's, but he built this house with an art studio, and we are now looking, if we could look through this building, we'd be looking down onto the mud hole. And that mud hole, that setting of the enclosure, was something that attracted these New York artists. You can see to the right of this photograph that large door here that is to bring murals in and out. So you're looking at the house in the foreground and the art studio that's an integral part of the building in the back. This building looks very much the same today, the art studio still in the back. So this was built by Frank Fowler, who was enticed here by James Hay, who is a large real estate developer. And Frank is one of those artists who was born in Brooklyn. He travels to England, to the École des Beaux-Arts to get his training. He winds up doing some true fresco work at the Luxembourg, Paris, as an assistant for one of the great masters there. He returns to New York. He meets up with James Hay, who convinces him to come out to the bucolic Nutley countryside, where he can still have his high-priced clientele just a short, half-hour away in New York City. And in fact, he does that, and he builds this first studio. I show you here a portrait that he did of an unknown older woman. This was a portrait that the Historical Society could afford because of the shape that you see it in, the dirt, the fading, the actual hole in it. We have recently been able to get this piece restored, and you see Frank Fowler in all of its glory. And just a close-up or two of this really wonderful piece. So all of these artists, they do murals, but they also do a lot of portraiture and a lot of different kind of art itself. Beautiful passage of the button on this woman's shirt. But the high-priced clientele that I'm referring to is a place like this in New York City, which is the Waldorf Hotel. This is on 33rd Street in Manhattan. When this building comes down, it comes down in 1931 or 32 so that the Empire State Building could be put up in its place. But the lunettes you see at the very top, and also the ceilings that are painted here, are all the work of Frank Fowler. He is doing his studies in his studio here in Nutley, and then and again, this is not true fresco, these are canvases that are then glued up to the wall. And I just want to give you an idea of the kind of work that the Nutley artists were engaged in. Go back to that house. When Frank Fowler's wife passes, he sells his home and his studio, and he sells it to Frederick Dana Marsh. Frederick Dana Marsh is an artist out of Chicago. He gets his mural training in doing murals at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. So he gets his training there. He winds up moving to New York and to Nutley on enclosure, and actually purchases 16 enclosure. Now, a piece of his that you can still see is this piece and this. Now, these are made of terracotta, and these decorated the Hotel McAlpin, which was up at Herald Square in the city, and there was sort of a basement restaurant that was down there, very fancy, and these were all over the place. Basically, the story was that when they were redoing the Hotel McAlpin, people didn't care about these. They tore them out. Somebody who happened to be a member of the Terracotta Society saw them basically in a dumpster and wound up saving a number of them. You can see them both Here they are have been reinstalled in a subway station down on, I believe this says Nassau Street, so the Fulton Street station downtown. You can still see these murals. Again, murals, not frescoes, not oil on canvas, but terracotta. It really doesn't matter what the medium is as long as they are part of the architecture and adhere themselves to it. Frederick has a couple of children, the Marsh children. The little boy on our right is Reginald Marsh, who becomes, I think, even more famous than his father. He's also an artist doing canvases, doing a lot of sketches, a lot of etchings, but also secures a really tremendous contract to do. And by the way, this is a piece that we have in the museum, and I'll tell you how we got that in a couple of minutes. But this is a lovely, tiny little painting, couple of inches by a couple of inches, of Reginald Marsh. But he also goes on to do this. Some of you might recognize this building. This is 1 Broadway. It's at the very lower end of Broadway in Manhattan. It is the U.S. Custom House, which was built in 1907, and it's actually the first building in New York by Cass Gilbert, who goes on to do the Woolworth building about 15 or so years later. But this is the Custom House. New York does not have an income tax at this point. You get all, or United States doesn't. All of the money comes into our coffers through tariffs. New York is the biggest and the best port, so we get the biggest and the best building. But that is 1907, and all of the murals that you see here were simply blank until we get to 1927, I believe, is when they then hire an artist, and it happens to be Nutley's own Reginald Marsh to come in and paint these murals here. These are canvas that are glued up there. It's interesting that his father, if we go back to these, he was commissioned to do maritime scenes. You see both of these are ship scenes. Custom House, what was very appropriate was for each one of these to be the story told of a ship that comes into New York Harbor unloading its goods. I show you this picture too to show you how the murals have to distort themselves into these very odd spaces. Even though it's grandiose architecture, it is architecture who is considered, or it's considered, the mother of all the arts. The other arts were considered handmaidens of architecture. They're there to serve architecture, and the murals are doing that here. I'll show you a couple of close-ups. You see how this has to fit into this very odd shape. You've got a ship coming in, of course, passing the Statue of Liberty. In a very different style off to the sides, he also had painted, and again, these niches were there when the architecture was built, waiting for someone to come and get a commission to fill them in, with different famous sailors. So you've got different scenes of New York, and you can see from this that Reginald Marsh is very sort of down and dirty, gritty New York that he's painting here. So different scenes that show what is wonderful about United States Customs and this New York Custom House. But again, note how they've got to be part of the architecture itself. Drawings that he made to make sure that everything works with all of that. And now we're back to 16 enclosure. When the Marshes are ready to move along, they befriend and then sell the home to Michael Lenson. This is Michael Lenson here. And Michael's son, Barry Lenson, is on the board of directors of the Nutley Historical Society. And we now have a very beautiful collection of Lenson paintings due to the generosity of the Lenson family, of his descendants. So I want to mention that because we also got that very small Reginald Marsh as a gift from the Lensons to the museum as well. It was a gift from Reginald to Michael, and it's been graciously passed on. It's one of our treasures that we have. So I want to thank the Lensons and Barry in particular for that. But this is Michael Lenson. Here he is in a very blurred photo, but again, showing these muralists as portrait painters as well. Here he is in his studio. You remember the 16 enclosure, that picture. This is through that big door in the back. You could see the high ceilings. You could also see the skylight up near the top there to let in that great northern light. These are some of the paintings that the Nutley Historical Society has that are Michael Lenson's. But again, Michael is was a muralist and the greatest of the New Jersey muralists above all. So he's shown here, again, dealing with the architecture. You've got to get up into these spaces, either to paint directly on or to glue your canvases in place. It's a very active art. One of the commissions that Michael gets, and this is a WPA commission, is to decorate a post office. We're going to talk about our own post office decoration pretty soon. But this is Michael Lenson, who has a post office decoration that he had to win an art competition. All of these artists did in order to get these commissions. And this is in Virginia, and this is in coal mining country. And so appropriately enough, the fresco here, or not the fresco, but the mural here, which is oil on canvas, is about the mining process. You see all the coal being down the chute here, and people working their tools. So something very appropriate. You see too how it's simply above the architecture fit into that space in the museum, in the post office. You're going to see an example of this in our own museum as well, but I wanted to show you that. Some of Michael's work that can be seen, this one with special appointments because of the shape that it's in right now, is a work about the civilization of man that's in Weequahic High School that I believe is undergoing a restoration now. Again, you can see the stairs are coming up and you've got to deal with the stairs as you paint it there. One really beautiful spot that you can see Michael's work is in the Newark City Hall. And when you go into the main hall there, on two sides, there are 8 scenes that trace the history of Newark. And these have got to be 10, 12 feet tall and very, very wide. They're absolutely beautiful. I'm just going to run through them for you to take a look at this artwork that is very close by, open to the public, and should be seen. The beautiful way you can see the figure in the back who's holding up that skin along there, the way that this that these murals not only fit into the architecture, but are flat. They are not just these illustrations that are hung on the wall, but they are really flat wall decorations. And that's one of the things that all of these great murals do share. And Michael is one of the best at it. So all these magnificent scenes of people freeing some people from the jail in Newark. You see them grabbing the keys up there. Power of the locomotive. You can see Michael's signature and name on the bottom right of this. And here is Michael in later years. Michael is born in Russia, comes here, I think, when he's about 11 years old with his family. They live over perhaps an uncle's tailor shop in New York. And he goes against sort of the family grain and becomes an artist, studies at the Arts Student League, winds up winning through his sheer talent, an incredible prize that allows him to go to Europe and study art for 4 years. And he does that. He learns from the old masters, from copying their work. He's forever a realist to the end. Abstract expressionism, modern art doesn't appeal to him in that sense. He stays a traditionalist in that way, comes back to New York in the 30s, and then makes his career there. He's both a teacher. He teaches at schools in Newark. He is the head of the WPA mural program in New Jersey. So not only does murals himself, but assigns others to do it, and is sort of the head of that program, and is one of the leading art critics of New Jersey as well. So muralist above all, but really does a lot of different things in the field of art. So one of our treasures, Michael Lenson. So I go back to this picture here now to introduce the next phase, which are people who aren't from Nutley, but their murals are in Nutley. This is our post office, which was, I believe, opened in 1941. And here is the mural that is over. And again, you see, just like Leonardo's Last Supper, this one also is interrupted by the door into the superintendent's office. This is the return of Annie Oakley, very appropriate, or as appropriate to Nutley as the mining painting was for that Virginia town. A couple of interesting things about this. And by the way, there was a competition held in town because the people got their say to what this should be, and my understanding is this narrowly beat out Belleville Nutley football game, which was going to be up there. So we felt that Annie Oakley was a bit more important, so she is she made the cut. You see Annie in the middle, who has just fired a gun. You see a skeet, a clay. Thankfully, it's not a pigeon, I don't think, that's being blown apart up there. Buffalo Bill is riding behind her. Note that she has got this big sort of a tent or a sheet hanging behind her to maybe let us know that this really is all kind of circus stuff, that this is a performance. The return, of course, is Annie's return from Europe, where she had performed in front of all of the heads of Europe for about 5 years before then she came back and moved to Nutley. I want to show you a couple of details of this. Let me get up to the top here. All right, so here is Annie. Here's Buffalo Bill. Here is a figure that I don't think anyone has successfully identified. I don't think it's Frank Butler. This is a wonderful little detail here. I am told that these are, Paul Chapman, by the way, is the name of the artist, and these are portraits of two of his sons, but a wonderful, almost Etruscan little detail of this with the horse's hooves. This is interesting in that it shows these Native Americans, all chiefs, by the way, and if you take a look at them, they look very noble here, but if you take a look back here, you see that they are about to leave the scene. They're going off to the left, and people feel that that's certainly a commentary on what was happening to the Native American population at the time, being sort of ushered off the scene. If you look on the back right, you'll see a little cluster of buildings here that interested me for about a year or two, and I started looking at them, then took a photograph of them and looked at them up close. And I'm wondering if any of you, before we get to the next slide or two, can identify any of these buildings, because I've been able to at least see 3 buildings that I recognize in Nutley, and I'll show you them in a moment. On the back right, that tower is Grace Church. I'll show you a picture of Grace Church. I think, again, this is 1941. Grace Church has got the most magnificent set, and we'll see them soon, of murals in Nutley. They are world-class. They're incredible. And my feeling is that this is probably a nod, excuse me, to that place. The building in the front here is City Hall. It's our town hall before it got the 3rd floor that it has now, which was in 1948, a couple of years after this was painted. It has this mansard roof, and I'll show you a picture of that in a moment. And then this building here, where there are, excuse me, 2 chimneys and an L-shaped building, is Vreeland House. What I've not been able to identify, by the way, this here is the cupola on top of Town Hall, is this white building with the conical tower. So I'm looking for anybody to maybe perhaps identify that. Here is Town Hall. You can see the mansard roof here and here. You can see Vreeland House, again, which I think is this building here, certainly one of the famous buildings in town that Chapman would have been introduced to. And of course, there's the tower of Grace Church. So that is our WPA mural that is in town. And I wanted to share that one with you. The next building that has got a mural in it from an outsider, if you will, is our public library, our really beautiful Carnegie Library. And that's what you're seeing here. I don't know how soon after its opening in 1914, because it's now covered with ivy, but this building opened up in 1914. 1913, Newark, Nutley was getting jealous of Belleville, who had just gotten a Carnegie grant, applied for and got a $20,000 grant from the Carnegie Corporation to build a library in town. This is the building that you see. It's beautiful brick because you wanted to spend all the money you got from Carnegie on a building that was going to be almost maintenance free. You didn't want to build it out of wood. So there are almost 2,000 Carnegie libraries across the United States, and Nutley has got this beautiful one here. Now, Fast forward a number of years to the 1930s, and it gets another grant. It gets a WPA grant, and actually it's in 1941 that it gets it. And I show you this picture because you can see across the back what's been added onto our Carnegie Library is this long wing in the back, and that's where our next mural is. By the way, the 1980, I'm not exactly sure what the year is, but in the 80s when this library expanded again, it expanded on the outsides of this. You go into the library today, not through this door, you cannot, but you'll see these outside walls incorporated into the inside of the building. It's beautiful to think that one of the things that Carnegie insisted on was that the plot of land that his library be built on, the town's library be built on, be big enough that if you needed to expand it, and he hoped that it would, you would have the property for it. Ours has successfully gone through 2 really beautiful expansions, and so I want to make that nod, or give that nod to the town fathers that really foresaw this spot on our oval, which was dedicated to primarily to education for the site of our library and its great expansion. So that expansion in the back is a WPA, and here is a wonderful picture of the model that is built on the bottom here of that expansion that is going to be added onto the library. So I thought I would share that. Here it is in reality. You can see along the back wall, if you're in this Frank Stockton room now, these windows are all boarded up. So it's a rather dark room with the lights out. I do some slide talks in there sometimes, but here you see the Rudder Grange, which is a mural that was painted in 1941 when this building opened, or when this section of the building opened, by a muralist from Paterson, New Jersey named Ivan Stoppe, S-T-O-P-P-E. So this is it when it had opened. This, of course, is Frank Stockton, who is, I think, even beats out Henry Bunner as our most famous author. Stockton lived over on Walnut Street in this house here, comes to New York in 1860. His first book is Tingling Tales. We all know certainly the Lady or the Tiger, which is his most famous book. That's got a fantastic Nutley connection because he came here because he befriended a William Boardman. William Boardman was the president of the Board of Education. He's actually the guy who secured the Oval, went into New York City and bought for $15,000 in 1890 the Oval and the remains of the Duncan Mill from a company called Arnold Constable. Then he goes on to be the president of the Board of Education from, I think, 1891 to 1899. But he is a friend, and he's the reason that Stockton moved here. And what we've all probably read is that Lady or the Tiger was written as a story to bring to a party at William Boardman's house one evening so that people could have something to talk about. So he started out Stockton with these children's books, but then Rudder Grange, who is his first adult book, and then he goes on strictly to write adult books after that. So this is a cover of Rudder Grange. Here is a close-up of the mural that's in our library. Picture illustrates the story of Rudder Grange, written by Frank Stockton, who once lived in Nutley and in whose honor this room is named. So this was a children's room in particular in the library for 7th and 8th graders that was dedicated as the Frank Stockton room and honored. He was honored with this mural. So here are the Granges. You see their houseboat down at the bottom, and it really is a nicely painted mural. See a couple of details here. This must be Pomona, the housemaid, who is sitting on the boat there. This is just a sketch that I thought I'd show you of some of Ivan Stoppe's work. Again, this is an artist who lived in Paterson for most of his life, and a painting that he did of a woman in front of a, looks like a medieval triptych, but he's an accomplished painter, again, who gets the commission to do this WPA work in our library. The next set of murals are in Grace Church, and they are done by an artist who is born in London, but he is living in Nutley at the time. His brother lives over on Prospect Street. He comes to settle into Nutley, befriends people in the enclosure area, and again, this is Grace Church before, and on a different property, this is on Whitford Avenue, before it moves, all on Satterthwaite property, before it moves to its new property and becomes the Grace Church that we know. Here is Grace Church before it gets its magnificent tower to the left that you actually saw in that 1941 mural. And here is Grace Church with its tower, but it's inside that Grace Church is really magnificent in its collection of murals. When you go into the building, you can almost have a service if you don't sit at a service. If you don't look up, you might not notice these, but when you look up, it's just incredible. Clinton Balmer, B-A-L-M-E-R, is this Nutley artist who was living in Nutley. He befriends Frederick Dana Marsh, who we talked about earlier. This is a church that opens right around the time that they are living here, and it is begging for murals. It's got all of these spaces are white spaces, and the architecture is very prominent, and it divides the walls and the ceilings into these spaces. There was not a thought that it would be decorated with murals, but these two artists could not get it out of their minds. So Clinton was going to take the first side, and then Frederick Dana Marsh was going to take the second side. Clinton begins his paintings. He does 4 or 5 of them. His parents in England get very ill. He takes his canvases, rolls them up, goes over to England, spends about a year there with them, finishes up his canvases, comes back with them done. At this point, Frederick Dana Marsh is off doing other things, so Clinton winds up taking on the entire commission. And the commission is this great little story, I'll just mention a detail or two, of no money. He's just got this idea. He's not a rich guy. He can't afford to do this on his own. His sister-in-law, his brother's wife, decides, listen, you do it for free. I'll somehow come up with the money to provide you with the paint and the canvas. It's not going to cost you anything except your time. So he begins to do it, and then Judge Goodrich, Henry Goodrich, who is Lloyd Goodrich's father, and they are all about things art, winds up being very impressed with that, goes out to the community, and does get individual donors for each one of these canvases. And from 1910, I believe, until 1919, Clinton Balmer works on the rest of these murals. So I'm going to just go through them very quickly to give you an idea of the quality of this work. So each one of them is split up into these 3 zones. You get the main story in the middle zone. You wind up having a memorial angel who's holding up a donor card, people who paid for this to be done, and then the scene either continues at the very top, or you've got some beautiful renditions of landscaping at the top. So I'm just going to go through these. This is the Adoration of the Magi. You see the 3 kings here, and Mary and Joseph here. And we're going to focus in on some details in a moment. This is the flight to Egypt to save the baby from the slaughter of King Herod. You see the great, this moon and the great tops of the trees along the top here. This is the apostles who are catching fish in the rough waters that are then calmed by Jesus. And again, some details to show you the quality of this painting. If you know the art of Titian or Venetian art, this is very much painted like that. It's all about the color and about the flow. Like I had mentioned about Reginald Marsh's murals as well, these are not just illustrations that are very lightly adhered to the wall. These really have the gravitas that these kinds of murals need, and you're going to see that as we go through. So this beautiful handling of the paint. This is Christ at the very top, who's telling the waters to basically calm down. Beautifully rendered details. And this is one of those, just a close-up of those beautiful, and if any of you know pre-Raphaelite art, these angels very much look like that. And it's not surprising because that's very English, and it's happening around the time that Clinton would have been back there. And these are the angels that would hold these memorial signs to let you know who paid for the work of art. We probably all know the Dorr family lived over on Satterthwaite Avenue. And by the way, I had read that a George Blake, who was said to be a direct descendant of William Blake, came in to do the lettering on this. So the hits keep coming for this. Lyman Nichols was the chairman of the building fund. Again, a beautiful memorial angel. Alice Maud Balmer, by the way, is Clinton Balmer's sister-in-law, so the wife of his brother, who had gotten the project started by paying for paints and for canvases to be done. So again, just some of these absolutely beautifully painted world-class murals that we have got in just completely filling Grace Church. And again, you see how this all, again, must bow to the architecture. They have to fit into those large spaces that the architecture gives them. And look how beautifully that is painted. Just a couple of the foliages across the top. So go there. This is an incredible place to see, and I want to focus in on a detail of one of the windows. Let me take a look at this. This is just, I'm really stunned every time I see this. Now, this one here is a father who's about to get the news of his son. We all know Joseph of the many colored coats. His brothers sell him into slavery. They wind up telling the father that he was killed, and they bring back the coat that has got what is supposed to be his blood on it. So this is an image of a father who is mourning, who has just been told of the death of his son. Then you look at the memorial angel, and it's in memoriam Philip Kingsland Hay, 1880-1900, which means we've got a 20-year-old that this window is dedicated to. You see a close-up of the grieving father, very touching scene. And the story here is that Philip Kingsland Hay's father is Joseph Hay, and he lives in the Hay House, that beautiful house that's up atop the mud hole, one of the great buildings in Nutley. Here are a couple of pictures that were taken of it back in the 1940s. He started the Nutley Water Works. He was very prominent politically and business-wise in town. His son goes off to Princeton, and that's Philip Kingsland Hay, this boy here. He goes off to Princeton in 1900, and while he's there, his his younger brother goes to visit him one day. His younger brother, Richard, who's a couple of years younger, goes down to Princeton. They're going to have a nice day. Philip decides to take a canoe ride with a couple of his friends. His younger brother kind of gets very nervous, gets out of the canoe, doesn't want anything to do with it. Sure enough, it gets flipped at a waterfall. And Philip and another friend of his are killed. They don't even find Philip's body until the next day, dredging the river. This is front page New York Times, by the way. The Hay family was that important. Philip, his body is brought back here. There's a very touching scene of the house that I just showed you, the Hay house, of all of the students coming up from Princeton to process and bring the coffin for the funeral to Grace Church. So his father had what I think is a very appropriate subject for this mural, which is a father or a parent who is mourning the death of their son, to be painted in the church. Now, what's interesting is this guy here is Richard. This is Philip's younger brother. This is him in the Hay house. And I got this picture because I wound up befriending Richard's son, who is Warren Kingsland Hay. Warren Kingsland Hay, who just passed about a year or so ago. And Richard, this is the little brother who went to Princeton and witnessed his older brother's death. They moved to New York City. They sold the house here in Nutley in the 1930s or so. His son told me that whenever they would come back to New Jersey, they would have to go over bridges. He would never go under tunnels. He was afraid of water for the rest of his life. And so that is one of the stories. There's also another memorial here. I haven't found the story yet, of an individual who doesn't give years like this of 20 years, but gives 4 days, 1890, December 7th to December 10th. So I'm trying to find the details of that sad story as well. By the way, this is a picture some of you might have come to the show that John Demmer and I put on of the photography of Carol, a local photographer. And I believe, going through everything, and he was very close with Hayes, that this individual sitting to the left of the large tree with the white shirt and the small cap, that those two kids there are Philip and Richard Hay, the boy who would grow up to go to Princeton and then get killed. So I wanted to show you how these murals are beautiful decorations, but they also sometimes really hit home with their local stories. The last one I want to show you is the Descent from the Cross. And if you take a look at the memorial plaque here, it is Sarah Anna Hay and James Richards Hay. So this is the father now, who has passed 20 years later in 1919. So has the mother. The sad story with Sarah is that 20 years earlier, when she heard that her son died, she was basically bedridden and didn't come out of that house for 20 years. Her life was just ruined with the death of her oldest son. So again, the Descent from the Cross is a memorial for the Hay parents, and again, just beautifully painted. Here is a shot up for two reasons: to show you again how the murals are handmade into architecture. You've got to fit into these sometimes very uncomfortable places, but I also want you to see the spotlights that are lighting these pieces up. When you're sitting in church looking up, you don't see the light source, you just see these murals lit. So this is up on top looking at them, but when you're seated, you cannot see these. Indirect lighting was not something that was used at the time. And the story is that the muralist went to a local tinsmith who's named Windheim, John Windheim. We all know the Windheims are still around today as plumbers, but they came up, he was a tinsmith and a plumber at the time. They came up and built, so this is made of tin here, but is stained to look like a wooden box. And they came up with this lighting that looks up. So again, the wooden piers or capitals on these columns, and then an aluminum box that was built to hold a lens that could light the murals at the top. So local work to even make these murals come alive for us. And, you know, I could have, some of you who know me know that I do a lot of tours in Manhattan, a lot of them of churches, a lot of them of Gothic churches, and, you know, murals. This happens to be from Grace Church at the back wall. But murals, again, could be terracotta, could be paint. I wouldn't think you're stretching the term if you looked at stained glass windows and again, Grace Church has got an incredible set of stained glass windows as well. So I just wanted to share that one with you. What I also want to tell you is that 1919 is when Clinton finished his 9 years of work on these murals. He lives his life, he's working in Manhattan. 1925, December 30th, so 6 years later, he's on the subway coming home, and he looks at a newspaper and the headline says, 10 years of an artist's life goes up in smoke. And he sort of looks over the guy's shoulder and sees that Grace Church burned. The roof burned. All of his work is gone. So he comes back to town, heartbroken. Nobody knows what to do. Goodrich again steps up, and they wind up finding donors. And for the next 6 years, Clinton, I don't know, nobody knows whether he reproduced the same canvases that would have been up there, but he paints the entire church again, the new ceiling. So Clinton not only did an amazing 10 years worth of work, it was totally destroyed, but the Nutley community was strong. The donors stepped up, and we have this beautiful church today. So it's really a wonderful story, an incredible collection. By the way, one of his murals, which is in a library in a place called, I think, Toxteth, some name like that, in a city in England outside Liverpool, about 5 or 6 years ago, had one of his murals restored, and it cost him £2 million to restore it. So we've got an incredible treasure in town. I've not been close up to see what shape these murals are in. I know they have not been touched in many, many years, but this is something that Nutley should rightfully take a lot of pride in. All right, so that is Grace Church. Let me just check my clock here so I know it's not 4 o'clock. Okay. So I want to go on to some of the non-professionals in town, our students. And I'm showing you here the auditorium at Lincoln School. And you see way back in the distance, again, architecture rules all. So up above a door and underneath in air grate are these two murals on either side. You step a little closer to them, and I'll just show you this one again to show you the air grate, to show you that this art has got to live amongst the architecture that it is in. So here neath your portals fair, you see the 1940 date on this. You see it signed by a Freeman and a D'Alfonso on the lower left. I want you to just keep in mind that we are in a middle school. These murals were done by two students who were 12 and 13 years old, and they're absolutely beautiful. So I want to show you that. And then here, so again, if we go back here neath your portals fair, our friendships grew, and again signed again and dated 1940. So there's that verse. Close up on it here, neath your portals fair, our friendships grew. It turns out that that comes from the Lincoln Center, or the Lincoln Center, the Lincoln School song. And you can see it's sort of your regular words when you get near the end on the next to the last line. Here neath your portals fair, our friendship grew. So true to our Lincoln is our pledge to you. So what I think is going on in this mural, which is very nice, is you've got these two figures as little girls. And probably people that the muralist knew, and then here I think they've projected them as they would look when they did grow up, and as their friendships did stay. I mean, take a look at the sort of the coloring of the woman on the left, her hair, just the way that she is. Here I'll show you a close-up of her. I believe that she is simply this woman on the left side. By the same token, if you see her friend on the right with the bow and that kind of hair, I believe she is the girl on the right here. So I think these students did a very clever thing, which was to show two students, contemporaries of theirs, what they were like as they grew up. There is a nice sign in Lincoln School that tells you about Charles Freeman. And again, 1927 to 1992. So if these were done in 1940, again, think that he's 13 years old, along with his schoolmate, Anthony D'Alfonso. So it really is, I think they're beautiful. Some of you might know that I had spearheaded trying to get, and in fact, getting some murals that we're going to look at next to have them restored. I would love for Nutley to turn its attention to make sure that these murals, which are very simple, are cleaned and restored in the future. I think they're really, really wonderful works of art for Nutley to keep. So those are those. I want to now move on to Nutley High School. Or middle school, or high school, or middle school, depending on when. So again, you know that this building, which overlooks the Oval, which is across the street, opened in 1927 as Nutley High School. It's not till you get well into the 1950s that the hats get switched and Nutley High School becomes Nutley Middle School, and it's now the John Walker Middle School. So picture when this is still a high school. In 1936, those of you who've seen plays in the auditorium probably recognize, I've heard from a number of you that these pieces used to scare kids when they were kids. They are a little bit sort of dark, but of course they're scenes from Midsummer Night's Dream. This one is from Shakespeare's play, very appropriate to have in an auditorium. You could see them signed June Driscoll, 1936, a Nutley high school student. And here are the three witches with the cauldron on the other side. On the top of both of them are appropriate lunettes. On the bottom are the masks of tragedy and comedy. You can see here Hilary Hill on the upper left, 2004, I believe that says. Hilary was an art teacher at the school who I believe painted the bottom panels for this. So these are a combination of students' work in 1936 and this teacher's work a little bit later. But those aren't the murals that really caught my attention in the middle school. This is the story that caught my attention, and you see this mural study in the back. And what this tells us is that art students in the school wanted to decorate their school. Now, along the lockers, along the main hallways, not in the auditorium, but along the hallways, this is 3 floors of long hallways in this school. You've got these lunettes, half circle shapes that are above the locker. So they're 6 feet or so above the ground and about a foot sunk into the wall. Here is one here. This is actually the painting of the study that you see behind you. So you can see that they're in this niche. And so a lot of people, when I first started talking to people about it, weren't even aware they were there, because you walk down the hallway, you don't really notice them. But they've been there as early as 1934, 1935, and 1936, all done, designed by students. And by the way, this is oil on canvas that were glued to the wall, and they had that same guy who helped Clinton Balmer attach his murals to the walls of Grace Church to also help the students do this. So again, a great community project. So these 5 students, one of them is not shown here, but you see them all getting ready. Note the one student on the left who I'm going to talk about in detail, that is Vicky Noyes. But you see, this is a scene of students along the banks of the Passaic or the Third River kind of reading. Perhaps it's an English lesson. You can see this is a picture of maybe 8 or 9 years ago when that crack first became apparent to me. So I want to show you that. You can see this dirty, filthy mural. Again, these have been up there for 80 plus years or so. This is March. You see the March winds blowing off to the right here. You see that these are all signed by each student and dated. Here is the March wind. You can see the damage to it over the years. This is it restored. So you see the March wind has been restored. There is no longer any graffiti or markings or scratches or paint chips that have gone away. This one is called Today. This one is done by Harry McDougall in 1934. You can see the Chrysler building being put up on in the background. And I'm going to show you these when they get restored. Again, here is a summer day. You can see the scratches, the dirt, the drips of dirt that have just accumulated on it. So this is a good example of it prior to cleaning. All this one needed was a cleaning. Some of them needed much more extensive work than that. But you can see the bright colors that were brought out by that. This one, of course, is the one that needed it the most. This was up on the 3rd floor. What we were told is that this was probably coal dust for 80 years that was being blown onto this piece. So this is what they looked like when the Nutley Historical Society got involved 80 years after they were painted. By the way, this is a nice example of one of the students' signatures. So back to this one. You see that crack. Then you see a couple of years later that crack developing, pulling the canvas away from the wall and even starting another crack down on the lower face as it pulled away. By the time we were able to sound the alarm and to get there, this piece had fallen off, and principal had found it on the floor, saved it, which was great. What I've got to say is I had been talking to different people about this, most notably to Silas Monsieur, who was very interested, who was a student in this school, and who also didn't want them to be lost. And when I came and told him about this one that is in danger, that I didn't know if we let this go for another year, what we're even going to have left, he immediately said, let's get this one done. and funded the project completely for this mural. So I don't think this whole project would have gotten off to any kind of start at all. And I don't know that this mural would even exist if it were not for Silas really stepping up very generously. So I want to publicly thank him for that. Here is my art restorer, Vilo Vargas, and Barry Lenson, our art historian, who is evaluating the piece here. Here you can see where they are. When I was telling you they were foot deep, they are up on top of the lockers, and there were 2 of them on each floor, 3 floors, so there were 6 niches. Here's what was happening with that piece. And Vilo, actually, this was the worst, had to take pieces of this, all of this stuff, back to her studio in Paterson to meticulously clean them. You can see she's doing some cleanings of these white spots here to get rid of the varnish, to get rid of 80 years of dirt and old varnish. But this one also needed to have all of these pieces cleaned and then glued back together and replaced. And here she is putting them back together. And then you've got all of these seams, all of these holes in it. And here you see the finished product. So here it is being put back, all the little pieces. Here is Vilo going in and masking all of those cracks with a master's brush as well. So Vilo Vargas was fantastic, and this is one of 5 that she did. She also, by the way, cleaned that Frank Fowler painting that I showed you to begin with. Here is that painting today. Again, the most ambitious, I think, of the murals. It's split up into 3 sort of pizza slices. You've got shipbuilding on the lower left. You've got welding or industrial arts on the right, and you've got construction in the back here. Here it is now beautifully cleaned. So here it is dirty, here it is cleaned up, and I just want to show you a couple of details of this. Again, students' work, it's just absolutely beautiful. By the way, this student who paints this shipyard goes on to work, he not only joins the Navy when he gets out of school, he goes on to work at the Portsmouth shipyard in Maine until he retires, I think in the 1970s, Harry McDonald. This is that one that I showed you earlier, the one that was in the worst shape. You can just see how horrible it is. Not only does it have all of this dirt and stuff dripping off of it, I don't know if somebody tried to clean this at one point. There is paint when somebody not too delicately painted around it, allowed paint to drip onto it. Paint is also missing, has worn away from a couple of spots. I was afraid of this one, what would happen when we started to clean this. So I want to go back because the woman who painted this is the woman on the left here who signed the painting as Vicky Noyes, but some of you may remember her as Vicky Noyes Ficus, who went on to be an art teacher in town, who went on to illustrate Anne Troy's book, Nutley, Yesterday and Today, and also to design the our town flag. So that's Vicky here, all grown up now, with students with the flag that she had designed. So getting back to this piece, here's what it was when we took a look at it. Here it is with some tests being done to see how clean it could become. I need to mention another donor here. It was just 1 month ago today that I got the news that Vinnie Lucurcio had passed. I want to call out Vinnie and Carol, who have been wonderful friends of Nutley history and the Nutley Historical Society. Again, I had mentioned that Silas had gotten this whole thing moving, but I needed to find some more donors. And when I went to talk to Vinnie, by the time my talk was over, he immediately not only agreed to take on that Today one that I showed you, which was split into the 3 pieces, I think the most ambitious, but another one as well. So he took on one from ShopRite, which I wanted this one because it's got seafood. I thought that would be appropriate for that. But the other one was from Vinnie and Carol. And I just want to, again, call out my thanks to him and say that Nutley has really lost one of the giants, and we are going to miss him. So I want to point that out while we're looking at this. This is Vilo again, who has now got half of this mural painted, and you can see on the lower left that octopus is now coming out beautifully. Still some paint loss, which we will deal with. Here it is at a further stage. You can see Vicky's signature about to come out on that, and here it is cleaned, and it's just absolutely beautiful. It's great starfish, octopus, this smiley crab over there. Nemo even sticks his head in here. And I remember growing up with Diver Dan, TV show in the morning, who have got this figure. And by the way, you can even see a face in there, which you couldn't see certainly when it was dirty. Here the piece is dirty. Here it is cleaned up with the horseshoe. So here is that octopus with the paint loss and the filth, and here it is today. And I'll just leave you with that, with a couple of details there. I mentioned 6 niches, 2 on each floor, 3 floors. But for some reason, those 5 students left a niche empty. So we looked at all these niches. We couldn't really find out or figure out why those 5 subjects were chosen. We had to come up with our own names for them. You couldn't find it on all of them. Some had names, some didn't. So what was the thinking? And so we got off of that and just decided, let's do something historical for this 6th niche, and not only wind up having all of the murals cleaned, but also finally complete a mural cycle that was begun in 1934. By the way, 1934 makes me remember Ruth Bedford, who graduated from this school in 1934, and who also graciously took on the restoration of the summer mural that I showed you back then. She was really thrilled to have restored a mural that was being painted while she was a student at that school in 1934. It was just a great circle to close with Ruth on that. So here is the empty niche. What do we do? What do we do for it? So we decided that we would have an art competition for middle and high school students. And what we would do is we would give them a subject matter, which was the Nutley Amateur Circus. This was an event that took place on March 27th, 1894, in a circus tent on the old Eaton Stone property, which is where Roche property was until fairly recently. It's a great event because it was an amateur circus, meaning that Nutley amateurs trained for it, and it was a charitable event. It was to get money to start a Red Cross chapter in Nutley. So it really had a lot of great qualities to it. It had Annie Oakley in it. It had Henry Bunner in it. It had a lot of fantastic imagery of circuses as well. So that's the subject. And we gave a couple of PowerPoint talks to both the high school and the middle school students, because we opened it up to both grades. We showed them images like this done by a Nutley artist back in the 1890s about that circus. Showed him a picture of Annie in the circus tent, Henry Bunner, as he would like to be remembered, and as we would love to remember him, sort of drunk on his horse at that circus. And we had the students, 17 students, put together half-size maquettes, which are studies. So instead of a 6-foot long, the niche here is 6 feet wide. Instead of that, they wound up making 3-foot wide watercolor studies of what they wanted this poster to be. And then we had a jury competition, which was led by Gary Urbe, probably the most successful artist living in Nutley, who lives on enclosure. And we wound up choosing a winner. But I just want to very briefly take you through some of the really wonderful Nutley murals that our students, middle and high school students, did to try to finish that beautiful mural cycle. And these are just all on foam core, on poster board, that they were left to their own imagination. We didn't want to dictate a scene to them. We wanted to just give them the concept. This was one of my favorites. You see Annie and Henry Bunner here. A lot of them went with the horse. Nutley was all about horses then. And just a couple of wonderful details from these that I wanted to focus in on. This trapeze artist, I think, is just beautiful. There actually was a boxing kangaroo at the event. So back to this. So we had that. None of those that we showed you was the chosen winner. We did have a chosen winner, and then what that student did, and he was a high school student, David Dizdari, who was wonderfully talented. I think he was starring in the school play the same year that he was painting this, was really a very talented kid who's now at Rutgers, who then didn't work with Gary Urbe, but work with him in the sense that Gary critiqued him a couple of times as he brought his 3-foot study to a full 6-foot mural on board that we could then put up into this space and again finally complete this great mural cycle. Here is the mural itself on its way. Oh, first, actually, this should have been the next picture that you saw. So this is the completed mural. It's the Circus. It's in the Eaton Stone Circus tent. We've got Annie Oakley here, Henry Bunner. The way it works right now when you're in the school itself is that it's at a level that people feel like they're partaking. You're the next row in this audience looking down at this really wonderful scene. So it lets us know it's the Red Cross charitable event. It identifies it as the amateur circus in 1894 and just really beautiful. So I'll show you here is its final journey that we brought to the room. And John Demmer was fantastic in installing it. I would say helped me install it, but I basically watched him install it. And it's there now permanent. This one is screwed in. It's not canvas glued to the wall. So if we've got to get rid of this or get it out quickly enough, we can. So it's really beautiful that this happened. And here it is in all of its final glory, that this is now a mural. I think it looks very different from the other ones, so we know that it's modern, but it really does complete this story that began, now nearly 90 years ago. So I thought that is where, and I've just got one quick thing to show you. I thought that's where I was going to leave this and then let you know that the amateur circus is a wonderful story. Nick has graciously allowed me in April to come back and to do 60 or 90 minutes on that event. It's an incredible event. I've got a great set of images from that as well. So this is just sort of a teaser as to what this was. You'll learn about Henry Bunner. You'll learn a lot more about Annie Oakley. You'll learn about how the town turned out for this incredible charitable event. So I was going to leave it with that. But then I came across another mural in town that I do want to end with because it's just hilarious, perhaps. So here is a picture of the municipal building and the courtroom that's on the second floor. This building was dedicated in 1930. This is a picture from that dedication pamphlet. There is now a mural in this niche on the back that is of, I'm going to say, justice, although people had their disagreements when it first went up. What I did read also is that before this was painted as justice, one of the commentaries was that this simply tried to pass itself as Carrara marble for about 20 years or so. So 1930 is when this photograph was taken. This doesn't get its mural until 1955. Here is the mural, justice, of course. Here is an early study of it, and you can see a homegrown justice, ours. And then I'm going to share with you what the town thought of it as it was going up. They were not too pleased with it. Marilyn Monroe in a nightie, that's justice here in Nutley. So goddess in blues versions shuns ancient robes of Greece for knee-revealing sheer gown as keeps magistrate company. And again, Justice in Nutley is a blues version of Marilyn Monroe in a nylon nightie. So there was, people were up in arms about this. By the way, this Peter Grice is the name of the artist for this. He also comes out of Paterson, lived in Paterson before he was hired for this. But they actually went out to an art committee in town to see what can we do with this figure before it's done. Her proportion, she's got Marilyn Monroe's proportions. Our justice shouldn't have that. Her sword looks like she's about to skewer shish kebabs, they said. That cannot happen. The background looks like she is presiding over the Netherlands of ice from the netherworld. What are we going to do? And so actually Edgar Sargent, Michael Lenson, and a couple of other prominent art people in town were asked to give their opinion of it. And basically what they said was, she will be fine for us as long as you blindfold her and make her our blindfolded justice. So the last piece that went on was her blindfold. And here is Justice as she sits to this day in our courtroom, but know that she was referred to as Marilyn Monroe in a nightie, and people had tried to sort of put the kibosh on this mural ever seeing the light of day. So that's what I've got on Nutley Murals and Nutley Muralists. And I'm happy to take any questions if anybody's got them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John.
You're welcome.
Amazing presentation. I know personally, with the Stockton room, I've gone in that room so many times, and I never knew who the muralist was. Ivan Stopp. I never knew that. So it's kind of neat to see that displayed for the presentation, and the shout out to the library. Thank you so much for featuring us within the presentation. So I definitely want to have a new appreciation looking at that art now and say, okay, this is the person who wrote, who painted this. Let me learn more about him.
And Ivan, by the way, joins both Paul Chapman, who does our mural in the post office, and Michael Lenson, in that he is also a WPA artist who winds up doing a mural in another post office somewhere out west.
Oh, nice. Yeah, there's so I'm definitely gonna check that out.
Good.
We got a couple questions here. Actually, I see some more coming in as I just said that. I'll start from the top here. Well, we were discussing the beautiful Grace Church. Do you happen to know who made the stained glass windows in the Grace Church?
I don't know. I will go back through the Grace archives to see. I know that what I've done is to look at every window to look for a signature on them, because at least I know enough about stained glass and all the churches that I do tours in Manhattan that at least one of the windows, if a particular group does outfits an entire church, you'll find their signature on one or two windows, and usually in a prominent enough place to find it. So I've looked. I can't find the stained glass artist. But if I do, I could put it out there on the Historical Society website. Good question, but I don't know. And they are as beautiful as the murals. You know, you'll find prominent Nutleyites like the Bouviers are, you know, people that give, or the Sargents are people that give glass as well. So all of the donors are named in the windows like they are for the murals, but I haven't yet found a signature of who the maker is. What I do know, by the way, let me follow up, that my understanding is that the window that I did show, which is a window on the back wall of the, not on the side walls, but on the back wall behind the altar, is Tiffany glass. So that one I do know. The side walls I know are not Tiffany, but I don't know who they are.
Well, you know a lot. You know a lot, though. I mean, you gave us a lot of great insight into that, though, so we appreciate that. Looking at the different schools, what is the condition of the murals in the Yannicos school? Do you think those are able to be restored?
What I would have to, and I'm going to confess here, what I would have to hear is what those murals are. The only murals that I know of, and if there are others, absolutely let me know, are just small sort of spot things in the auditorium. I don't know that there are anything on the level of the Lincoln School murals or the middle school. If there are, then I've completely missed them, even though my son graduated from Yannicos. So I don't know what those murals are. If they're anything like these, let me know.
Let's see. And I think a lot of great compliments here. People really enjoyed the presentation here. Somebody said Thank you, John. The presentation was wonderful. You make the class of 1968 proud.
Okay. The only donor, and I'm glad that that did come through, is that Ellie Slimkowski, who is on our board of directors, and there's always bits of information that whenever I end any of these things, all I think about is what I forgot to tell people. The other donor was, and I'm glad to be reminded of that, was the class of 1968. Ellie had gotten a number of her classmates together, and they wound up getting enough donations to fund one of the restorations of that. So what I really did love about this was initially, I thought that someone, that I would get one donor that would do the whole thing. It wouldn't cost me any time or effort, and that didn't happen. And what was wonderful is that we really did have this outreach, not only of people like Silas and Ruth Bedford, but ShopRite and Vinny, and then this really grassroots group that Ellie organized that were Nutley students, essentially, that gave money for that. So class of 68, we are proud of you.
Just again, I think, yeah, it's so nice to see everybody coming together for these restorations of these murals, of all the different organizations and the donors.
Yeah, it really is. You know, I have two things that I want to mention. Contemporary murals. I've noticed in my walks, and I was remiss in not photographing it, across from Yanacor School, I think that's Brookline Avenue or Brookfield, whatever that street is there, there's a home directly across from it with a garage in the back. And the side of the garage has got a wonderful mural of just a very simple, I think it's a sunflower maybe and a rose. And it's just, again, it's the size of their garage, and it's a great amateur public mural. I also noticed when I'm in, I guess, Boys Park, so the county park, the building that's up right near the bocce ball courts has got on the outside facing Park Avenue what must have been a city-made or a town-made mural that's made of plastic that's set into the wall, of recycling plastic in a wonderful way. And then I recently got, and I'm really sorry I don't have her name, an email from a working muralist in town who does things in people's homes, who does things in people's businesses. But the most prominent thing, and the one that I've always seen, and I was very glad that she sent me her connection, is if you're on Route 21, I think in Passaic, you see the football stadium right off the side of the highway, and there's a big mural of the mascot of that stadium there that she had painted a couple of years ago. So muralists are still working professionally and as amateurs in and around Nutley.
It's nice to see that to continue to go, and more pieces of artwork are appreciated, and everywhere. The murals, you can find them everywhere, which is such a great thing to see. All right, I think this is a good stopping point. I think we have a lot of great things that we discussed today, and as John mentioned, he's going to be speaking about the amateur circus. It's going to be Saturday, April 10th, and we're so grateful for John to be able to present for us again on another excellent topic. And so I'll promote that on our website and Facebook and social media, so everybody can just learn how to sign up for that.
Beautiful. Good. Looking forward to that one.
Thank you. And
right, thanks, everybody. I appreciate people listening.
Everybody have a good rest of the weekend. And thank you, John.
Okay. Take care, Nick. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.